that these calls are heard by the finance ministry and by the government. I think the middle class in India, by all accounts, is shrinking. The rich are getting the richer, and the poor are getting poorer. The income disparity is increasing. There has to be more disposable savings allowed in the hands of middle class to be able to spend more, to be able to consume more. And I think the figures all across are showing that the consumption in India is suffering, and we need to do something to revive that overall animal spirit in the economy. So I'd not be surprised, honestly, if the government were to increase the threshold limits of taxes under the new tax regime. Honestly, Karthik, I don't think so that there'll be any tinkering around in the old tax regime, but the new tax regime will be made. And should ideally be made more attractive so that more and more salaried individuals or corporates even try and move towards the new tax regime. I think there's a gradual nudge by the government also. And under the DTC, government would want to have a very uniform and a simplified tax structure. So directionally also, I think new tax regime makes more sense. So I don't see any magic pills coming through in the old regime, but in the new regime, I definitely foresee and I expect that the basic threshold limits should be increased, and some benefit should also be additionally provided to the senior citizen class.
Okay, let's just discuss the income tax slabs for just a bit, Mohit. Is there a possibility that with a threshold increase in the new tax regime, the number of net zero or nil tax filers is actually going to increase, and hence is there going to be a problem for the government to collect those taxes? And while the consumption story at one level may pick up, government's own capex could take a beating with the slowdown in tax collection.
Look, honestly, I think the number of people any which ways paying taxes in India is extremely low, right? I think it's sub 3% if I'm not wrong. And number of people filing nil taxes, at least you will get a larger base in the under the tax net by increasing the basic threshold limits, increasing from 3 lakhs to 5 lakhs, 5 lakhs the base limit. I don't think so that should harm government too much in terms of the finances which it is collecting through direct taxes. In any which ways, I think the pie of indirect taxes is getting larger and should ideally become larger and larger as we move by. People getting under more tax net, I think that's more to do with the uncovering of hidden incomes, trying to get more people under the tax net, improving the GST net, improving the overall ease of business and everything around it, right? So my sense is that will happen gradually. I don't think so the slabs have got anything to do with it per se. You might just find a little bit more of zero tax filers, but that's okay to take as long as it creates more consumption and as long as it creates ease of living for so many people around.
And you're saying that no tinkering in the old tax regime, so old tax regime will stay. We will not have one unified tax regime, but the old tax regime will stay. Okay, no problem, Mohit. Let's move on to another very important aspect of personal finance, and this comes by way of the record number of SIP folios that we are seeing and mutual fund folios that we are seeing. Is there going to be any change in the mutual fund slabs when it comes to long-term capital gains or short-term capital gains, especially when there is this debate about bringing debt and equity mutual funds at par? How do you think that is going to pan out in budget 2025?
Oh, Karthik, I honestly wish and pray that they just forget about the mutual fund and leave it aside. Okay. I think they've done enough and more changes on the LTCG and STCG last year.
You're saying changes? Do you mean they've done enough and more damage, or changes is the right word you want to use?
Whatever, the way you want to take it. But I think, look, debt is now fully taxable. So that any which ways is a no case. Equities, they've increased the STCG, LTCG last year. So I don't think so they're going to dabble with it every year. Okay. Enough and more amount of disturbances were caused last year. But yes, they have gotten a lot of uniformity both towards listed and unlisted asset classes last year. Even on the property, on gold, everything. There was a lot of clarity being bring about, and now if you see, there is so much uniformity across all asset classes. I don't think so the government needs to dabble more. Any which ways, look, finally, long-term capital gains, one has to also understand there has to be enough long-term capital gains for people to be able to pay those taxes.
Absolutely.
You can keep increasing rate, but if markets are not supporting you, then there are hardly any gains to be paid out taxes on,
Absolutely.
right?
So what does the government gain at the end of the day? Very true.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next investment class. Let's talk about real estate. You just touched upon it, Mohit. But last year again, we saw a lot of rancor around real estate investments and one rate to apply with indexation benefit, one rate to apply without indexation benefit, and then the removal of indexation benefit was brought back. Is that going to be status quo? Is that going to stay as is, or do you think there's going to be some tinkering with indexation again this time around?
Oh, totally. I don't think so. Government could foresee what happened last year, and there was so much of hue and cry about the indexation benefit being taken away. And I think government did the right thing by clarifying that okay, all the there was a grandfathering which was given, which is whatever you brought previously, you could decide whether you want to take indexation benefit or you want to pay the newer tax slab, the lower tax slab of 12.5%
Right.
without indexation, right? And I don't think so. Government is now going to enter into that real estate space any longer. So I again imagine and foresee a status quo out there.
Okay, so status quo on old tax regime, status quo on long-term, short-term capital gains on mutual funds, status quo on indexation. Will there be some change in REITs again, some tax incentive to prop this entire real estate market by way of real estate investment trusts?
Totally needed, Karthik.
Okay.
I think REITs is something which has to gain more prominence, and commercial real estate is something which has to give more, which has to be given more fillip. Overall, real estate as a sector, I think, is at the crux and center of any economy. So my sense is the bigger questions still remain in REITs, that dividend should not be double taxed. Basically, if that could be solved for, it will create a lot of clarity. SEBI has already taken a lot of initiatives to democratize the ticket size for REITs. I think more and more REITs have to get listed. Some norms have to be simplified, which I don't think so are so much in the purview of finance ministry, but more so in the purview of SEBI as a regulator.
Right.
But yes, I think dividend taxation and a few other points could be made simpler on the REITs front.
Okay, simpler dividend taxation on the REITs front. Another, when we're talking about markets and market-based investment, security transaction tax is also something, Mohit, that has been in debate for a very long time. And with the kind of crackdown that we are seeing from SEBI as well as the finance ministry on the entire FNO action when it comes to retail investors who lose money, do you think there is some case this time to tinker with the security transaction tax?
Karthik, I honestly wish it were reduced. It is just at the inflection point where it will break the back of quite a number of traders. Honestly, it's a fairly high STT which we in this country are paying on every trade. So my sense is, look, if you really want to drive volumes, and that should be the endeavor in anything and everything which a government does, it has to drive volumes. It has to try and spread the net far and wide so that more and more people are part of the tax net. You can't make it so steep that very few are able to pay it and very few can afford it, and then most of the people try to wriggle out of it, right? So my sense is STTs are already at a fairly high level, both in cash and futures market. Some easing would definitely help, but I honestly doubt the government will go the opposite way. I think again a status quo out here is what I'm expecting.
Okay, but with restrictions in the FNO trade for retail investors, in any case, I think the government's overall kitty of tax collection by way of security transaction tax would go down. So, I mean, is there possibly a case that the government may actually increase STT this time around to compensate for the reduced FNO action?
I doubt, honestly, Karthik, that the STTs will be increased. I will be fairly surprised if that is the case. Honestly, my sense is with the increased the transaction sizes, perhaps the value size increases a little, and it kind of compensates for the retail collection through the STT kind of thing. So I am not really sure as to how much impact it will have on the overall collection of government. Perhaps it could be a market impact, more to say, but my sense is I still continue to believe that it'll have a status quo kind of an impact.
Okay, so let's move on to another asset class, and this one is pretty much the favorite of all households, which is gold. So when somebody wants to invest in gold and look at gold as purely an investment class, do you think the reduced custom duty will stay, or will they be tinkering with that?
Gold is a tricky case, Karthik. Look, honestly, I think it directly impacts. Gold and oil are two things which directly impacts your trade deficit and fiscal deficit per se. Government has been running a fairly high trade deficit for last 2-3 odd months. And look, gold custom duties, governments time in and time again have tried playing around with it. It went to as high as 16%, was reduced dramatically last year. It has again increased gold imports. Now you can argue that it reduces the black market overall, the second market which goes on, parallel market which goes on, but a reduced customs duty is having a serious impact on our trade deficits. So I'm really not sure what the government finances look like out here, and would the FM want to again dabble with it. But I don't further foresee a reduction in trade duties or customs duties.
Okay.
It might just increase given the trade deficit.
Oh, might just increase given the trade deficit. Okay.
Possible.
Sure. Mohit, another important investment class emerging in the world, especially in the US, comes by way of cryptocurrencies. We've seen the budget has stayed silent, conspicuously silent on recognizing this investment class, and one pays taxes on gains on crypto, but the losses are not offset. Now with the Bitcoin at a record high of $109,000 a piece as of yesterday, I haven't checked the rates this morning. Do you think there is some chance that there's going to be some clarification on cryptocurrencies, or do you think the government is not going to budge on its stand? And it is pretty much a gray area stand. It's not illegal, but it is not regulated. So will anything happen in cryptocurrencies?
I think honestly, Karthik, when you don't understand something or when you really don't want to get into a messy situation, it's best for everyone to just stay silent on particular topics. And I think that is what the government is trying to do out here. They're just keeping silent on this very important topic. My sense is world around, we will see a lot of people following the US what do you say, the way US solves for this, or the US formula per se. I think people are waiting as to what Trump will do in terms of crypto and how the US market will emerge, and perhaps then we will see some economies and some countries trying to follow suit. I don't think so in India government will be in a hurry or in a rush to kind of do anything around it. I think they'll just leave the topic as it is on the side. The enemy which was taxing it to the core, so there's no further scope of taxing it higher from the current levels. So my sense is government might just stay away from this topic.
All right. And there is also some discussion on fixed deposits and the taxation on fixed deposits. Mohit, theoretically, does it seem viable for the government to encourage more bank deposits and add more liquidity in banks? Do you think there is a case where the government should look at the proceeds from fixed deposits to be taxed like mutual funds, short-term, long-term, and not really get added back to the income?
Look, I think it was a long-lasting demand of bankers that deposits be brought, or the debt funds or fixed income taxation be brought at par with the deposit taxation. Now that's been done for last two budgets. So debt is completely taxed, as in fixed income mutual funds are completely taxed in the hands of investors at marginal rate, and so is fixed deposits. So it's at par now, and it is about on the merit of the asset class as to what finds more favor. And my sense is over last 2 years we have seen a lot of pull down from retail investors from fixed income investments. If you see the additional money going into fixed income investments is not so high, right? So my sense is the banking liquidity ease off. It's more in the purview of central bank now. I don't think so government is going to do anything favoring the fixed deposit taxation out here. I don't foresee that scenario.
All right, you don't foresee that scenario. And finally, the ninth point, we're News 9, so we like to do things in the number of 9. So finally, my ninth question to you, Mohit, is senior citizen savings scheme. Last year, we saw that the government had doubled the investment for senior citizens, and this particular scheme is something that a lot of senior citizens put their life savings into. Is there room to add more cushion for senior citizens by way of the senior citizen savings scheme?
Karthik, a very important trivia. The sum total of this year is also 9, so this might perhaps be the year of News 9, right? And
with you around and on our show, Mohit, I'm pretty sure this will be the year of News 9. But do go ahead.
I wish you all the very best. Look, senior citizen savings scheme. I honestly wish and pray government does a lot more to make this attractive. Senior citizens need more concessions around the budget, and the best way to pass it is to make this tax free. Honestly, the interest income is, I think, around 8 or something right now. If they were to make that tax free, it will ease off a life of so many senior citizens around the country, and be a very, very big boost to their life and their expenses and everything. So my humble request to the powers that may be is that senior citizen savings scheme be made, the interest earned from that be made completely tax free, and I think they'll go a long way.
All right. Well, Mohit, thank you for all your inputs on budget expectations and really logically drilling it down to what could practically be taken up by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and what could potentially be ignored. So thank you so much for your inputs. But before I let you go, the markets have just opened a few minutes back. Let's just look at the charts and see how the Nifty 50 is trading. I'm told the Nifty 50 is trading above the 23,400 levels this morning. This is the highest it had touched since the 10th of Jan. It has come slightly below that now to 23,396 or so. The mood of the market today seems a little mixed. While the large caps are doing well and the top 50 and top 30 companies happen to be in the green this morning, there is some negativity on the mid cap and small cap space. So Mohit, before I let you go, what is driving the mood of the market today? Is it Donald Trump and hence are we seeing an upsurge in the IT stocks this morning, or is there more to understand the mood of the market?
Oh, totally. I think world across, it's the Trump trade which is getting played out, which went to an extreme, other extreme, and I think the world is now easing off a little. You see the dollar index went to as high as around 110, eased off to 109 and then to 108 and then again inched up a little. But I think the world is now easing off, thinking that all that was said prior to coming to office could have been more scare and less reality. In reality, it will be a very gradual and calculated measure. Once you assume office in those powerful positions, it is not very easy to do whatever you were thinking you would be able to, right, in a flash. So it might just take time for Trump to shape up his policies, and that's what the world is now realizing. And my sense is, I think these are good recovery trades which are happening all across, and that should play out very well.
All right, and a little bit of a silence, if not silence, then at least Trump did not go full hog on the tariff plan in his inaugural speech yesterday. Is it fair to assume at this moment that it is definitely not the top priority of the Trump administration to slap tariffs, and is it something that could play out in coming weeks?
Look, I think he did mention vaguely that it will come around on 1st of Feb. So it's not something which is off the radar totally. But yes, it was not his top priority, and perhaps he wouldn't have gone detailing out on each tariff and everything. But he has gone all out on his big agenda items like immigration and other things. So my sense is it's not completely off the charts. It will come gradually, but it won't come in a manner which I think the world is envisaging. It will be a very gradual and a very calculated thing, and perhaps more trade-like, right? Trump is a businessman by heart, so he would want to trade things with countries and try to pull off a bargain, right? So wherever he can't pull off a bargain, perhaps the tariffs go up, and wherever he can pull off a different bargain, perhaps it might be a little ease than what we are kind of thinking and making out to be.
All right, Mohit, we will leave it at that. Thank you so much for taking our time this morning and joining us right here on Morning Brief at 9.
My pleasure.
Well, moving on to other domestic news which is coming in this morning, and the first one comes by way of Go First Airlines. The National Company Law Tribunal, or NCLT, has now ordered the liquidation of Go First Airlines. The order came from NCLT in response to a request from the cash-strapped airlines lenders. It must be remembered that in August last year, lenders of Go First Airways had come to the decision of liquidating company's assets after rejecting bids by investors and by interested suitors to revive the bankrupt airline. Go First had filed for bankruptcy in May last year, subsequently, in May 2023, by the way. Subsequently, it had received 2 financial bids under bankruptcy process. One of the interested parties had also raised their offer after push by Go First lenders. The budget carrier owes a total of 65.21 billion rupees to its creditors. These include the Central Bank of India, Bank of Baroda, IDBI Bank and Deutsche Bank. The foreign lessors of the aircraft in the Go First fleet had been locked in a tussle with the company after they were blocked from repossessing their planes due to a moratorium imposed by Indian courts. A local court, however, had in April allowed them to take back their planes. And there's also news coming from fintech player PAYTM. India's fintech major PAYTM is now looking to expand its business in the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia and Singapore. PAYTM Cloud Technologies Limited, or PCLT, a wholly owned subsidiary of 197 Communications, aims to take PAYTM's merchant payments and financial services to international markets that show a strong demand for digital finance solutions. PAYTM intends to invest up to 20 crore rupees in each new subsidiary. It also expects to complete the incorporation of these subsidiaries in these markets within 6 months. The subsidiaries will fall under PCTL, which will own 100% of the shares. Company sources have reiterated that no additional government or regulatory approvals are pending, thus ensuring a smooth expansion. The subsidiaries will operate in the payments and financial services sector, reflecting PAYTM's core focus is India. Well, with that, it's time to head into a quick break. But coming up on the other side, a rolling coverage of Trump 2.0. And further on, we will discuss what the new Trump presidency means for trade with India. Joining you on the show will be Mohandas Pai and Dr. Srinath Sridharan. You're watching Morning Brief at 9.
Is IGI certified? Your legacy is IGI certified. Your ambition is IGI certified. Your diamond is IGI certified. Authentic moments need authentic diamonds. Get your diamonds IGI certified. 14-step grading process. 50 years of trust. IGI Trust Certified.
Mama must be missing us, na?
Let's take you on, babe, give me one day. Feel the itch under my skin, it's a one day. You be like when you see we end up, hey. It doesn't matter, just gotta get going.
New GT line, Taigun and Virtus. Volkswagen.
कि बड़ों के मम्मी का, पापा का, दादू का सबका ध्यान रखेगा।
रिटायरमेंट के बाद किसी पे बोझ ना बनने का परफेक्ट प्लान। कैनरा HSBC लाइफ इंश्योरेंस रिटायरमेंट प्लान। कैनरा HSBC लाइफ इंश्योरेंस, प्रॉमिसेस का पार्टनर।
It's not the fiefdom of politicians. They owe it to the people. Matter is now more about faith of the millions of devotees than just political slugfest. Does that mean that I can't get a job in Chennai, although I may be best suited for that particular job? They have more civic sense, they have more of civility than all these men. My name is Sudha Sadanand. Welcome to the South Indian.
Best day ever. I'm excited to see Trump back.
And hopefully we get a chance to see him participate in victory celebration.
I'm thrilled to be back. We are going to make America great again.
All right, and Donald Trump is back at the United States as its 47th president, and we will bring you some glimpses of what he said at his inaugural address yesterday in Washington. Well, like I told you, Donald Trump took the oath of office as the 47th president of the United States inside the rotunda of the US Capitol on Jan 20th with the promise to push the limits of executive power, deport millions and millions of immigrants, as he puts it, secure retribution against his political enemies, and transform the role of America on the world stage. The swearing-in ceremony of the incoming president, which traditionally takes place at the Capitol's West Lawn, had moved indoors owing to a frigid forecast arising out of the Arctic storm in sub-zero temperatures in Washington. Incoming Vice President J.D. Vance has also been sworn in. Immediately after his inauguration, Donald Trump delivered his inaugural speech in which he announced the sweeping executive orders for day one of his second term. He followed that up with a second speech after witnessing the presidential parade, where he signed as many as 80 executive orders to reverse actions taken by the Biden administration.
I don't think they will. I don't think they can.
After a slew of executive orders and border promises on day one, Trump vowed to keep America safe. He said he will take bold action to secure border and protect American communities. This includes ending Biden's catch and release policies, reinstating Remain in Mexico, building the wall, ending asylum for illegal border crossers, cracking down on criminal sanctuaries, and enhancing vetting and screening of aliens.
Foreign policy is a big statement. I mean, my priority on foreign policy, it's going to be to keep America safe. Very simple. It's a big question, though. That's a very big question.
Who is going to be the first foreign leader that you plan to meet, or who are you going to call tomorrow on your first day?
I've already been meeting people. I've been meeting them. I've been talking to them. I met with Prime Minister Trudeau, like all Governor Trudeau. I met with numerous foreign leaders.
And Donald Trump, in his first executive announcement, said that the national emergency was being declared at the US-Mexico border and that all illegal immigrants would be deported back to their home country. Mexico, in turn, on Monday announced a project called Mexico Embraces You to provide support to Mexican citizens who could be deported from the United States. Take a look.
First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border. All illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy. I will end the practice of catch and release. And I will send troops to the southern border to repel the disastrous invasion of our country.
Well, Trump also cast himself as a peacemaker in his second inaugural address, but immediately vowed that the United States would be taking back the Panama Canal. He said that the canal was given to Panama and not to the Chinese, who now control the canal. Take a look.
We have been treated very badly from this foolish gift that should have never been made, and Panama's promise to us has been broken. The purpose of our deal and the spirit of our treaty has been totally violated. American ships are being severely overcharged and not treated fairly in any way, shape, or form, and that includes the United States Navy. And above all, China is operating the Panama Canal, and we didn't give it to China, we gave it to Panama, and we're taking it back.
And as expected, US President Donald Trump officially announced the creation of an advisory group aimed at carrying out dramatic cuts to the US government. The group, dubbed DOGE, or Department of Government Efficiency, is being co-run by Tesla chief Elon Musk and has grandiose goals of eliminating entire federal agencies and cutting 3/4 of federal government jobs. But minutes after the announcement, DOGE was sued by government employee unions, watchdog groups, and public interest organizations.
Today, Donald Trump signed a document that says the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, begins its work. This is a group that will have a 2-year mandate. It's going to be run by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. There's a bit of controversy around it because right off the bat, like literally a minute after Trump started office, the DOGE was sued by several organizations that say it lacks transparency. They're troubled because what's going on is that it operates in an environment where nobody knows who has been hired, nobody understands what its remit is, and so there's a lot of questions about what the DOGE is going to do. So far, what Trump has said, what Musk has said, is the DOGE will save $2 trillion from the annual budget, which is a tremendous amount of money in about a $6 trillion budget. They've also said it's going to streamline government, it's going to cut jobs, it's going to cut regulations, and it's also going to make suggestions for how government just overall can be better run. Elon Musk is controversial. His role in this commission is quite controversial because he has billions of dollars of contracts with NASA and other parts of the United States government, Department of Defense for one. So the question that a lot of people have, critics of the Doge have, is he going to be cutting places in the budget that where then he can swoop in and sign a contract for cheaper and make money for his own organization? So there's questions about significant conflicts of interest between Doge, his companies, and Elon Musk.
All right, so Donald Trump is back at the White House, but what is his re-entry after a 4-year period and becoming the 47th president of the United States mean for bilateral trade and his equation with India? Joining me to discuss that this morning is Mohandas Pai, Chairman, RN Capital, and Dr. Srinath Sridharan, policy researcher and corporate advisor. Mr. Pai, let me begin by asking you this one fundamental question that emerged as part of the inaugural speech of Donald J. Trump yesterday. Can we now safely assume that climate change and all talks around climate change are now history, because the Paris Climate Agreement is at risk, if not over and obsolete already, and there is absolute clear-cut focus on fossil fuels? What does this mean for climate change, something that has been the toast of town and for policy advisors across the world for the last many years now?
Look, my view is that climate change is happening around the world, and the world is taking steps. Corporations are taking steps, societies are taking steps, countries are taking steps. But the sad thing is, the entire matter has been captured by these climate extremists who are trying to bring about, regulations that are hurting people. Like in the UK, it's hurting people, and people don't have money. It's forcing change at a pace not required. I think we've got to temper it down, and that's what Donald Trump is going to do. You cannot do away with fossil fuel altogether. And if you just cut down on fossil fuel exploration, you're going to increase prices to a point when people cannot survive. I think we got to moderate it, and this will possibly moderate what is happening. But the long-term move towards reducing carbonization is going on. I think there's been tremendous progress, and progress is going on. In the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to see greater progress. And in the US, many corporations, almost everybody is working towards that. So I don't think this is going to have a major impact, except for those climate extremists who may not possibly not get the kind of money that they were aspiring for their pet projects. So I'm not worried about that, because I think the secular trend towards reducing carbonization is very, very huge all across the world.
But with the US not respecting, let's say, the Paris Climate Agreement, is there going to be more pressure on developing economies like India to cut their carbon emissions?
I don't think so, because, the US government has very little to do, in my view, because it's all private corporations, right? Private corporations are doing it, and their, technology is coming on. The EV revolution is on, and natural gas is there in a huge way, which will reduce carbon emission substantially. So I think all the things are working very right. What President Trump possibly does not want to be held hostage by a few set of NGOs who try to determine the future by pushing pressure on people through the media and otherwise. So I think it's time for things to be cooled down a little bit, to evaluate and to go on. I'm not so worried on this score.
Okay, you're not worried. Srinath Sridharan, let me bring you into this discussion. Drill, baby, drill. We heard that again from POTUS, Donald J. Trump yesterday, and he's saying that the new Green Pact is going to go. The EV target of 2030, 50% of US fleet to be EV by 2050 is out of the window, and the focus on fossil fuel is going to be back. What does this mean for US wanting to export its own petroleum and natural gas to countries like India and India's trade surplus with the US?
So, Karthik, I think the green is caught between the red and the blue in the US. I think that's very, very clear. I don't think India needs to worry about anything around sustainability or climate change, because we have made far better progress than almost any part of the world, be it renewable energy as a large proportion of our total energy consumption. But US very clearly is moving back to what I call the old lobbies. The only thing that I have not heard in the last couple of months of the campaigning is the gun lobby coming up. Otherwise, you've heard about tariffs on pharma, the drug lobby, the tech lobby, the entire now the narrative around oil. The conventional US lobbying has been all around these big bucks industry. And I think what it is also going to try and do is, if you remember last year, there were very frenzied conversations around the so-called US-Saudi Arabia pact of buying oil. And then we all realized that there was not a pact at all. I think very clear Saudi and US are moving far more closer. I think the oil is here to stay. And I think let's also do a step back. I think a lot of poll promises that President Trump has made, I think we should wait and watch for the next 100 days to figure out how many of them are actually enforceable. Because half an hour after his swearing in, the very first legal suit has been filed against the entire new idea of Dodge, right? So I don't know how many of them will stand legal scrutiny. His idea of not giving citizenship by birth will hit the legal wall in the US. And a lot of these we'll have to wait and watch. But again, very clearly, I think India is far more stratified. We have one leg with Russia, the other leg with the US. I think we are good to go for time being.
Okay. Mr. Mohandas Pai, let me bring you in very clearly. I think the message that did come, and this is something I asked Srinath also in my previous question, but I think a very clear message was that with fossil fuels, the new Green Deal and the EV target by 2030, 50% of US cars to run on electric seems to be an agenda that Donald Trump does not want to continue with. Is this being done because Donald Trump wants to promote fossil fuels and the natural resources available within US, or is it a bid to thwart the lithium-ion batteries that come from China?
No, I think what he wants to do is to make sure that he uses his natural resources to reduce the deficit. There's a $2 trillion deficit. China had a $1 trillion trade surplus. China is a mercantilist economy which exports at all costs, subsidies from the government. I think there's a problem globally with China's economic management, and the world has to react. And he has to react because he's the largest contributor to China's surpluses. And I think what he's doing is he's making sure there'll be enough oil for the US to become a major exporter, which it was growing up. And the US will not have to import in future. And he's going to use that money and the revenues to reduce the deficit in whatever way he can to balance the economy, which is very important. I mean, we can't have the US borrowing $2 trillion a year all across and running up huge deficits, which we know that they will not be able to pay back. There has to be a rebalanced economy. And to an extent, what he's doing is, I think, very clear.
All right. Srinath Sridharan, let's shift focus now to something that was pretty much a scare and a sense of worry, but Donald Trump did not emphasize too much on it in his inaugural speech yesterday, and that is tariffs. While he did mention that tariffs are going to be on his agenda, he did not repeat the numbers that he had used in his election campaign of 60% tariff on China, 25% on Canada and Mexico, and 20% for the rest of the world. Now, India's effective tariff rate with the US stands at about 3%, but India charges higher tariff for shipments coming from US into India. Now, is retaliatory tariffs a real threat which in the next few weeks could unfold and could hamper India's relationship with US?
The answer is yes, Karthik. It really is a real threat. Tariffs, I think I would probably broad base it as, if you look at the entire narrative around deregulation that the entire West Coast lobby has been pushing the Trump regime for, is I think what is going to happen is the big tech players wanting far greater access globally. I don't know if you've read the AI regime, the new regime that the framework that they released last Monday. President Biden's administration released it. It actually buckets India and China as the third tier country, which would need case-to-case approval even to buy chipsets, GPU chipsets from the US. So I think the nature of using trade for probably far greater access to the market is something that the President Trump in his businessman capacity would do. And I'm being a little sarcastic here. The very fact that very few presidents or heads of state have actually personally profited in the week that they're going to take charge, as we saw the entire crypto coin issue. I think this is the nature. He's going to use everything possible of what is good for probably the US, and I'm saying probably the US and for himself as well. And I think there India has to navigate very, very clearly. We have spoken about Web3 and AI as if we are ready. We are not ready. I think our entire STEM ecosystem is still way behind the curve if we want to be any meaningful AI player in the world. That's one. Two, if you want to do anything in the Web3, there's a lot more Indian government policies that will have to encourage. And the nature of the beast in this is, if you have to buy the hardware from the US, how do we actually break the barrier? Are we going to be forced to give in to allow for the US big techs more market access here? And I think that's going to be the real challenge.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Mohandas Pai now back. You did talk about, Srinath, you did talk about STEM, and I think that is an area of focus. But Mohandas Pai, let's understand, there was, of course, a crackdown on illegal immigration as part of Trump's inaugural address, but there was absolutely no talk of H-1B visas. So visas, is that something that Indian students and those from the IT sector who happen to work in the US need to worry about, in your opinion?
Well, first, Indian students don't have to worry, but I think there needs to be a tightening of criteria for Indian students to go to the US by the United States. If you look at about 325,000 students, I reckon about 100, 125 have gone for genuine education. The rest have gone there to take some small courses and possibly immigrate or stay in the US. And I think that's a matter of concern for everybody because we don't want this to become a route for immigration by different way. Now, as far as H-1B is concerned, one important event that's happened is the Indian software industry's dependence on H-1B has come down. If you look at the latest data, more American companies are using H-1B than Indian service companies. They have brought it down. They've hired more people locally in the United States. And after COVID, when work from home became ubiquitous, it doesn't matter whether you are in the next street or in the next town or in a different part of the world. Everybody has gotten used to work from home, and that means work remotely, and that means the need for visas has come down. And I think India is well placed as far as the rhetoric goes. But remember, the US has greater amount of risk by tightening up H-1B. The US is short of people. India is a force multiplier for American big tech companies. There, very large number of people are working there. Let me give you some data. Out of 6 million people working in software in America, 1 million are Indians.
Okay.
America has 10 million people working for it globally, out of which additional 3 million are in India, because out of the 6 million working in software export, 50-60% is for American companies. Out of 10 million working for American companies globally, 4 million are Indians. And in the free world outside China, 50% of software hiring is happening in India.
Right.
I mean, India is a force multiplier, the provider of high quality human capital, and the US does something like that. All the American companies set up offshore centers here, like the GCs are set up in the last 2 years.
Right.
Look at the extra. So America will lose out big time, and I think they understand that very well, because there's no country in the world which can support American technologies domination by providing human capital. There's no other country. Let's be very clear. America requires India to take on China. Now, China is constrained because of the Chinese firewall. But if you look at the innovation in AI in China, you look at what Alibaba, Tencent, others are doing, it's unbelievable. The kind of money they're spending on technology, on AI is out of the world, much more than the United States. So the only way America can compete with India. So, there could be slight dislocation, slight noise, but I'm not overtly worried, because remember, the tech lobby is very strong, and the tech lobby needs people, high quality people, and they have to compete. So I think it's a win-win. So that is not a worry for me as much as it was in Trump 1.
All right, not as much of a worry as it was in Trump 1, but staying with the subject of human resources, I think, Srinath, there's also another aspect which Trump was fairly vociferous about in his inaugural address, and this was this entire debate of diversity, equity, inclusion. So will DIE out? Will diversity die out under Trump 2.0? In his speech, he said there are going to be only 2 genders that his administration is going to recognize, but he also asked his administration to be colorblind and really make appointments and promotions on the basis of merit. But this entire inclusion and this entire diversity debate, is that something that is pretty much now a chip of the old block? It's not going to come back?
Not really, Karthik. I think he's addressing to a certain demographics, and I think that's a narrative that he's using. The reality is DEI is natural, is equality based, and that's something that everybody has to understand, whether it is in politics or whether it is in corporate world. When we say ESG or governance, I mean, it is about that it is being fair and equal to everybody. So what he is talking about, that the binary of genders, is something that probably is his personal view. It is almost akin to somebody speaking about, let's say, the sensitive topic of abortion and the right to abort, right? So some of these will, I think, figure out and probably play back politically as well. If you were to today say DEI in the Indian ecosystem, because we have 2/3 of the generation less than our population less than 35 years of age, DEI is extremely important and very, very sensitive. And we have realized the backlash that one of the corporate leaders faced 2 weeks ago in India for making a comment about work hours. I think President Trump probably will see a pushback. I think one euphoric wave that he's riding today is new bromance with Elon Musk, which is allowing to make comments on X. And I think give it some more time and let's figure out how that works out.
And that relationship is a very interesting one, and I think everybody wants to see how long that plays out and how well it plays out. But Mr. Mohandas Pai, let's keep Elon Musk aside right now. I want to come to the overall strategic play when it comes to investments. Now, Donald Trump also mentioned yesterday that he is going to encourage manufacturing in the US, and that is something that again is directly targeted at China. But with more manufacturing coming in the US, is there going to be pressure to rebalance the trade with India as well? And are we likely to see more pressure to buy US clean energy, to buy US defense? And is there going to be more resistance to our pharma and auto exports going to the US?
First let me address the DI issue.
Okay, let's hear you out.
See, DI has been captured by a small set of people who are extremists. Now, you can't have transgenders go to a woman's toilet, participate in women's sports. It's not done. You got to look after women. Women have equal rights too, right? They were being captured. And the rhetoric was going so far to say a baby born in a family should be taken away and put into foster care. That's the only way we can bring in equality. It's totally absurd. It's captured. What is bringing back, I think, is sanity. And it's very important to bring back sanity, not allow society to be captured by a small set of extremists who are trying to push their agenda because they've got access to power. Now, when you talk about
all this extremism, is it not fair to then invest in more infrastructure for the third gender? I mean, at one level, we want to talk about inclusion and we want to talk about, being gender neutral. But at one level, just a toilet debate cannot ignore the third gender.
Nobody is ignoring the third gender. The third gender has equal rights. This is about people who change their gender. They change their gender because of rhetoric, because of what they have said, because of propaganda, etc. And when they change their gender, children under 18 are forced to cut off their body parts, take drugs which hurt them and is irreversible. And these are not done for children. Let's be very clear about that. It's not about the third gender. If you're born a third gender, you have equal rights in all society. Nobody can discriminate. And I don't think discrimination exists in the matter that people talk about, because you have to exaggerate everything to try to create a narrative. Now, when you talk about tariffs, you talk about things, I think India has to open up to the United States. The US is possibly the second largest or the largest trade partner because we got a huge trade surplus, trade deficit with China, more than $100 billion. We have a surplus with the United States and a large surplus in services, and we have to open up. But the key is, what is the US going to sell India from the US economy? Because manufacturing has come down. Defense, yes. We have to get defense from the US. They're sophisticated. The Russian technology is very old and no longer acceptable to a country like India. And two, we need to get high technology from the US. So the US is a market leader. And there are other things which we have to do. Yes, we have to reduce some of the tariffs in our business with the US to demonstrate, because we are getting tariff-free access for a large number of what we export. So I think India has to open up. Maybe it will force India to open up. India's problem in trade is not the US, it is China.
Right.
Because the Chinese dump. The Americans don't dump. Americans know what is ROI, profits, etc. They got quarterly results they have to give out. They will not dump. So we need Americans. But China is the big enemy for global trade because they dump, they're mercantilists, they're $1 trillion surplus.
Absolutely.
$1 trillion.
While I understand the China debate, Srinath Sridharan, last word to you. We are running completely out of time. I want to understand, if US is one country that India enjoys a trade surplus of about $35 billion with, in the overall trade deficit scenario, it's not something, the pressure from US to buy more US produced goods and services, including oil, I don't think that is going to do Indian economy any good, would it?
So not really, Karthik. I mean, it's a trade-off, right? It's a zero-sum game. I mean, you're not going to buy just because you want to buy. You're going to buy because there is a need, and you will have to balance, I think, the geopolitical volatilities. The reality is, I think India has kind of showed that it is smart at least in the last 3 years. We have seen the Red Sea issue, the Ukraine issue happening, the Israel-Hamas issue happening, and yet we are balanced. And in fact, if I were to call it out, it's a Western hypocrisy, right? You had countries like Germany actually beating the sanctions and buying Russian oil through India. Yes, India did see an opportunity to profit from it, but the reality is, I think India has to navigate this balance.
Right.
And I think prudently, we have also had the regional blocks, right? The Quad and the other things that we have been part of. And I think one thing we missed out, I just want to make a point is, will President Trump dismantle the multilateral institutions like the UN, because he's been bullying almost every single multilateral
He's pulled
institution.
out of WHO, so that doesn't seem like a very far cry, Srinath. I think that is something that we may see happen in the next few days, if not a few weeks. But gentlemen, with that, we've run completely out of time. But thank you so much for taking time out and joining us on this very important debate early morning today, just a day after Donald Trump took oath as president of the US. With that, it's a wrap right here on Morning Brief at 9. News and updates continue right here on News 9 Live at 10 o'clock. Join Shriya Kundu as she brings you what's the latest. Thanks for watching.
We won! We won!
This is the best day ever. I'm excited to see Trump back.
And hopefully we get a chance to see him participating in victory celebration.
I'm thrilled to be back. We are going to make America great again.
Mama must be missing us, na?
Let's